good things will happen if Ohio State plays to their strength in their home playoff game against Tennessee.
You are Locked On Buckeyes, your daily podcast on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, Buckeye fans, to your Tuesday edition of Locked On Buckeyes, which is your daily Ohio State podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host, Jay Stevens, also the host of the Jay Stevens Podcast. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, because you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Simply visit FanDuel.com to get started. During today's show, we'll discuss if Judkins and Henderson should play together, as well as some changes the Buckeyes are making to their offensive line. But before we get to any of that, it's all about some good news for all Buckeye fans all across the world, that good things will happen if Ohio State plays to their strength in their home playoff game against Tennessee. And that should be a little refreshing to you hearing that, because it was to me when I thought about some things going on with this game in an area that Ohio State can just take advantage of Tennessee. Tennessee is a very, very solid football team. They're a team that can come into the shoe and win. I'm not going to be naive and say no, this is Ohio State's game no matter what. I'm not going to say that. But Ohio State has certain guys on their team that Tennessee can't stop. Jeremiah Smith, Emeka, Egbuka. Do you think the Volunteers have an answer for Caleb Downs or Lathan Ransom or Cody Simon or Sonny Stout? Do you truly think the Tennessee Volunteers at their best have an answer for those guys? I'm going to say no, because I don't think anybody on Tennessee's team or coaching staff has an answer for those guys. Now, granted, those guys are on the outside, but those guys have made big plays all season long. Now, the linebackers are in the box, but you still get the gist. Those guys have been playmakers. Those guys have done a lot of great things in Columbus this year. And that is what you need to lean on. As Jason Fitz of Yahoo Sports came on here and talked about the game records and the philosophy of how you're supposed to exploit your game records and use them and make them a focus of your game plan, that's the same thing for this week. Ohio State has a lot of game records, a lot of guys that make plays, a lot of guys out there that can get the job done. Well, make them the focus of the game plan. Now, a lot of this is going to remind you about the Michigan game. You may say, Jay, game plan, poor game plan. The last time we had one was against Michigan. I'm not just solely talking about the offense right now and Chip Kelly. I'm going to talk more about Chip Kelly throughout the show, because he said some stuff during his presser on Monday that kind of got me thinking about some things that he said that might need to be altered. But one thing I do know is this about this team. We have seen Jeremiah Smith, when Ohio State just throws the ball to him, most of the time he's going to get the ball, catch the ball. The one way we know the opposition can stop him, pass interference. I think it happened twice in the Michigan game, 2 or 3 times. I forget the exact number, but there were a few times when there was pass interference called. The first one, I'm not going to be naive and dodge the reality that Jeremiah Smith initiated that contact. I'm not going to say he didn't. He definitely initiated that contact, but it was called on the defender. And that may happen in the game against Tennessee. You can't allow those things to be such a hurdle that you can't get over it. Pass interference on your guy, and when it was on the other guy, it don't matter. Go back to the huddle, line back up, and run the very next play. That's got to be the mindset, not only to maximize the strengths that Ohio State has, but also to make sure that your weaknesses aren't a big part of your game plan. And Ryan Day talked about this during the presser on Monday. He made this statement about Ohio State maximizing their strengths. Quote, "We've got to make sure we're maximizing our strengths and minimizing our deficiencies, our weaknesses." That's very important in this game. Now, you may want to say, Jay, that's kind of coach talk. That's kind of coach speak. Maybe. But I think Ryan Day is learning. And when you have a few weeks after such a brutal loss to the team up north, you're going to come back and maybe say some things that might be coach speak, but also might not be the norm. Now, sometimes Ryan Day says you got to look at the film, but you've had plenty of time to look at the film. And you also realize there are certain things that we saw in the film that we were waiting to see the film to make any big, bold proclamations. And once you saw that, you said, oh, okay, like, I got it. We got a guy that's wearing number 1. We got a guy that's wearing number 32. We got a guy that's wearing number 4, number 2, and number 17 on offense. We got to find a way to maximize our strengths to get those guys the ball. We also know there are some weaknesses on offense, the offensive line. We'll talk more about that in the very next segment because there's going to be some things going on with the offensive line that might make people a little bit nervous. They make me nervous. I don't fully buy into all the things that they might do. However, I do think that at some point, they got to figure out a way to overcome some of the deficiencies on the offensive line. Some of that may be with calling certain plays to help out the offensive linemen, making sure the pass protection is rolling to help the areas that are weaknesses on the O-line, keeping a back end or a tight end in to help the offensive line to block. I'm not saying max protect the entire time, but there are ways, even with motioning receivers, you can help the offensive line. Now, you may say, Jay, does a motion really help? Trust me. Sometimes it's those things that not only allow the quarterback to see if the what type of coverage the defense is running, it can also help other areas of the offense as well. So Ohio State has strengths on offense. They got strengths on defense. Use them, maximize them, and allow your strengths to be the biggest part of your game plan, but also be a wise coach and realize we got to help our guys out. One thing Chip Kelly said that I actually am very proud of him for saying it, it was in regards to Ohio State needing to get the ball to their weapons against Michigan. Big surprise. They didn't do it in that game, but it sounds like what he thinks they have to do will help the game plan for Tennessee. Quote, I think you got to get the ball to those guys. We're really talented on the perimeter. Some guys scheme up to take those guys away. You still have to scheme up and be creative enough to get the ball in those guys' hands, end quote. Doesn't that sound like something you want a coach to say after one of the worst game plans of the season? No, not one of the worst. It was the worst game plan of the season. Isn't that something that you want a guy to say, oh, okay, I realize we got a Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka. Those two guys on our side, the other team can't stop. If you go in there with that mindset, that's going to be right there in your game plan. That's going to be exactly what you're going to do to help your offense flow. And when Chip Kelly is making this statement about, oh, we got some guys on the perimeter, and no matter what the defense does, we have to not only scheme up some stuff, be more creative. Thank you. Thank you. And a lot of people are waiting for Chip Kelly to get behind the podium to answer questions from the media, and there's going to be more media availability from the players and the coaches throughout the week as the playoff is upon us, and the playoff is running some things. Ohio State's still going to have some input into how things are ran during the home game on Saturday, but the CFP is going to be a big part of this too. In the intros, Ohio State has to run a video for Tennessee during the introductions of the teams. Buckeye fans will not like it at all. There'll be a lot of boos. Not mad about that either. But with the CFP coming in, that's more access to the coaches, to the players. Even the media gets availability to practice as well. What will they be able to see? Nobody knows. But these are things we're going to get more of throughout the week. More coaches talking, more information, more news, more nuggets, and we'll dive into them all week right here on Locked On Buckeyes. Speaking of some things we're going to dive into right here on Locked On Buckeyes today, it's some things that might look a little bit different on the Buckeyes offensive line when the Volunteers come to town. This episode is brought to you by the College Football Playoff. It's that time of the year. The College Football Playoff is back. And with the new expanded 12-team format, it's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT Sports coverage of the College Football Playoff begins December 21st, starting with the College Football Playoff Kickoff Show, presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern, leading into our first matchup, the Southern Methodist University Mustangs battling the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. Then, the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the College Football Playoff, presented by Allstate, live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. This episode is brought to you by Billiards Plus. Billiards Plus has the best selection of pool tables, game tables, shuffleboard tables, and more. And the best service in Central Ohio. Now is the time to reserve a table so you can unwrap years of family fun on Christmas morning. Everything you need for in-home and even backyard entertainment is at Billiards Plus. They are family-owned and operated. And when you talk to the staff at Billiards Plus, you know you're talking to an expert who won't steer you wrong. No matter the season, Billiards Plus has you covered for all your indoor and outdoor entertainment needs. Kenny, Sarah, and the whole staff will always go above and beyond to give you the best customer service in the industry. Billiards Plus, visit their showroom on Dublin Center Drive in Dublin. Thank y'all for tapping into Locked On Buckeyes and making this show your first listen of the day. And one thing you do when you make this show your first listen of the day is you get an honest opinion about the things going on with your Ohio State Buckeyes heading into the first 12-team playoff ever in the sport. The first time Ohio State's hosting a December football game, and the first time Ohio State's hosting a home December football game when the Volunteers come to town. This is Tennessee's first time coming to the Shoe, and I cannot wait for the matchup. I also cannot wait to see, well, I can't wait to see because I don't really want to see it, how this new offensive line looks. Now, those of you, I'm not a big fan of like rotating and shifting and trying different guys out in regards to different situations. And, some guy had a bad game. It's time to bench him to go somewhere else. I'm not really a fan of all the moving of players when the playoff is here. And in college football, it's one and done, baby. You lose that one game, and you're up out of here. Well, Ohio State is planning on doing some things a little bit different with Luke Montgomery. And I'm going to read this and just talk about it, right? Luke Montgomery is going to rotate with Tagovailoa and Austin Serval at guard. Ryan Day said Luke Montgomery got some reps at guard, so you'll probably be seeing him at guard some this game. We still have a whole week of preparation, but we're going to rotate those guys. Now, this reminds me of earlier this year. Forget if it was game 1, game 2, preseason, or in the middle of the year. I forget. But I remember Ryan Day talking about, it's just preseason. Well, Seth McLaughlin and Carson Hinsman, they could be swing guys playing center and guard. Thinking, what kind of stuff is this? We don't never hear stuff like this talking about the offensive line. And then it was, you might have some guys rotate, talking about Austin Serval and Tagovailoa. What? What is this? And now you're saying that a guy who ain't really played all year, hadn't started a game, is going to come in the what is a do or die situation. You're going to rotate at guard? Now, I understand also, context is everything, that Ohio State's offensive line is nowhere close to full strength. Seth McLaughlin, gone, injured for the year, off to the NFL. Your left tackle, Josh Simmons, gone, injured, off to the NFL. Backup left tackle, Zen Mahalski, injured. I don't know if he would start if he were healthy. So it had to shift some things and move some things around, bring guys off the bench. I understand all of that. But is this the move to rotate? Let's just start there. This isn't basketball where you're going to play 8, 9, 10 guys some nights. This isn't basketball. This isn't a sport like hockey where you're going to change all of your entire line at one time over and over. This isn't that. This is football where chemistry is built and created on the field. And maybe there's better chemistry with the other 4 guys on the O-line when Luke Montgomery is in there versus Austin Serval or Tagovailoa. I don't know. But there are times that you see out there on defense when the defensive line starts to rotate and all of a sudden the opposing team sees got the backup guys in here. A couple of them, not even a whole unit, just a couple of backup guys. Next thing you know, run. A lot of times teams score when a couple backup defensive linemen are on the field. There's a danger in rotating it sometimes. You're going to rotate on defensive line. I'm not trying to say that is something you're not going to do. But to rotate on the offensive line, that's going to hurt chemistry. That's going to hurt a lot of things. If you think, this is one thing I'm going to say specifically, if you think that Luke Montgomery he deserves the opportunity to play, cool. You can think that. And you can believe he deserves an opportunity to play. However, I caution you, don't do it too often. When you find a formula that works, roll with it and don't stop. Just keep rolling. I see it all the time, man. I see guys on offense or on defense. A lot of times in football, you see a team, something with Ohio State. We're going to talk about this later on in the show too. We see teams where they get into a rhythm. May it be a huddle, and they get into the huddle and then quickly get out of that thing and then run to the next play. May it be an up-tempo offense. We've seen Ohio State do very well with an up-tempo offense at times. Whatever it may be, we see teams get into a groove. We see teams get into a flow, maybe running the ball, passing the ball, whatever it may be. All of a sudden, coaches go away from it. That was one of the biggest complaints from the Michigan loss, was that Ohio State had some success in certain areas, but didn't let those things just keep flourishing on the football field. And I don't know why that was a decision, but Ohio State has an opportunity to learn from their mistakes. I hope, this is something I hope happens, and I don't have much confidence or faith that it will, which makes me very nervous about this game, more nervous than I was before starting this show. I still think Ohio State can win. I think Ohio State should be favored in this game, maybe something we can talk about tomorrow. But my hope for this game is that Ohio State's coaches realize once they figure out a formula that works, they stick with it. If you truly think Tegra Shabola should not play, why rotate? Oh, because you're bringing in a guy that hasn't played at all. Yeah. And what could happen early on? He could get beat. And what could that do? Mess up his confidence. Now, he could get beat and bounce back. Cool, I understand all that. Wouldn't it make more sense? And I heard Zach Boren say this on the podcast, and I really hadn't. I had been opposed to this for certain reasons about putting a new guy in at center and moving Carson Hinzman to guard. But Ohio State's offensive line has had a lot of success with Jackson at left tackle, Carson Hinzman at left guard. And maybe the formula is Josh Padilla at center, Austin Sarivold at right guard. Because you shore up your blind side, your left side of the line with Donovan Jackson and Carson Hinzman. You put a guy in at Austin Sarivold that is one of your best options at guard right now. And then you put in a guy at center at Josh Padilla, who's a grinder. He's a state champion wrestler, which already knows low man wins in wrestling. And that's going to be something that's going to be very, very beneficial with the big hog mollies that Tennessee has on the defensive line. Maybe that's the formula. Now, I hadn't thought about it until Zach Boren said it, and I'm still trying to get my brain going because I truly, as much as I don't like rotating at any position on the offensive line, I truly don't like putting a new center in there that's never played this year and at this level started. I truly, truly don't. Maybe it's a missed opportunity by Ohio State to possibly put him in later in the year. But when you want to go with experience, especially when Seth McLaughlin goes down, especially against Michigan, I get it. I understand it. But Ohio State has to figure something out. Let's just say this works against Tennessee. Do they try that against Oregon, or do they go with a different look on the offensive line? The coaches aren't afraid to try to make a formula up week by week, especially with the O-line. The only thing I also hope is that nobody gets hurt. I never, ever am a person that believes somebody should get hurt on a football field or wishes that on somebody. That's very ill. That's very sickening to think about, somebody wishing someone to get hurt. No, never, never. You never want someone to get hurt. Ever, ever. As well as, let's just say no one's getting hurt this game. If everyone stays healthy, put your best five out there. And if you need some game time to figure that out, as weird as that sits with me, because I truly don't like it at all, I can understand why you might think that, the coaches, but that also might come back to bite you. Because if Tennessee sees a guy out there that ain't played at all this year, and say, oh, we going to blitz him. What could that lead to? It could lead to disaster. It could lead to a loss. But if you go out there with the guys that you know that have played and you know that they can do certain things well, scheme away for the weaknesses if you're able to. There's a lot of stuff going on with the offensive line. As much as I love O-line play, it's kind of weird to talk about the O-line every single week because we got to. But man, putting a new guy out there, rotating on the offensive line in this big game, y'all, I am not a fan of that move. I am a fan, though, of one thing with the Buckeyes offense, and it's regarding Quinshon Judkins and TreVeyon Henderson and how they can play together against Tennessee Saturday night in the shoe. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, and it's all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Simply visit FanDuel.com to join today, and maybe you're trying to put your first $5 bet on the Ohio State Buckeyes. The Buckeyes are currently 7.5-point favorites to beat Tennessee this weekend, and the over-under is set at 46.5. Those are just a couple lines and a couple ways you can place your first $5 bet on your Ohio State Buckeyes. All the action goes down in two places on the FanDuel Sportsbook app and at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and to make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Thank y'all for tapping in the Locked On Buckeyes and making this show your first listen of the day. Ohio State has the luxury of having a backfield that's elite. Has elite players in it. Now, the numbers might not back it up, or the usage of those guys at times might not back up how good they are. Because you look at the numbers, you're thinking like, shouldn't one of these guys have over 1,000 yards? Shouldn't one of these guys just pop off every single week, or one or the other? But in context, the offensive line has not been at full strength. They've been playing a guy at right guard most of the year that is not one of the best 5 offensive linemen, or even one of the best 2 guards in Columbus. And I think it's a big reason why those guys have had the numbers they have this year. But one way to get them to have bigger numbers and to be a big focus of the game plan is to have them on the field together at times. And maybe it's 20 personnel, 2 running backs, 0 tight ends, or it's 21 personnel, 2 running backs, 1 tight end. I am not saying that they both have to be in the backfield, but I do believe that both of those guys can play together. And Chip Kelly went on in his press conference and talked about the playing 2 running backs. Kelly said Ohio State hadn't really shown many 2-back looks because Henderson and Judkins' skill sets are very similar. He went on to say this, quote, "We're really a 1-back offense. We get into some 12. We'll get into some 13. When both of those guys are in the game at the same time, who do you send in when you need a blow? Making personnel decisions early in the week versus a certain defense is really about what they'll play," end quote. Now, I think it's a very wise thing to say from Chip Kelly about, well, if both those guys are on the field at the same time, who do you put in to provide a blow? Could have gone out there in the portal, got somebody else. I know it's too far for that. You got James Peoples. I know Caleb Downs has been in that room a little bit this year. So I'm not saying that Peoples is the guy or Downs is the guy, but there are guys on the team that you could put in and give them a few plays or give them a couple carries to allow the other guy to get a little rest. Trust me, that's out there. However, there's also the reality that while they are mainly a 1-back system, we have seen TreVeyon Henderson split out wide before and beat a linebacker in a 1-on-1 up the sideline. And someone said, man, that looked like his high school film, which it did. And I'm thinking, why are y'all waiting right now to do this? Oh, waiting for the playoff because, as Ryan Day says, that was the goal. That has always been the goal. Not my words. It's Ryan Day's words. That has always been the goal. And so if that's always been the goal, you might be saving yourself for the playoff and you're here. Let's go ahead and do this. But also, you can put Henderson in the slot. While they do have similar skill sets, their skill sets aren't the same. Henderson is a better between the tackles runner than he has been throughout his entire career in Columbus, but he can be more of that one cut and go. Get up out of here, go 60, take it to the house, do that thing. He can get that done consistently. Quinshon Judkins, over and over and over and over again, is going to pound that thing up the middle. But we've also seen Quinshon Judkins. He has a little getaway speed. Now, I don't say he got get-out speed. Henderson has get-out speed. A little getaway speed, that's Quinshon Judkins. And so they both can be on the field at the same time. Now, if you're an opposing defense, no matter if you're in a 3-4, 4-3, 4-2-5, whatever base defense you run, it doesn't really matter. If you see both guys out there, you're thinking, okay, do we put a linebacker on Henderson? Do we put a safety on Henderson? Like, do we line him up with the corner? What do we do? Whatever it is, you have to put a lot of attention on the outside. And even if the ball is not going out there to Henderson on the outside, maybe in a single split out wide by himself, or maybe in the slot, whatever it might be, you have to give him some attention because you have no idea what's going to happen next. If there are more eyeballs focused on 32 to the left or to the right of the offense, that means that there's not as much attention on number one in the backfield. So many different options you can do with both guys out there on the field at the same time. Now, Ohio State normally does have a tight end on the field, or if they do not have a tight end at the end of the line, they have a tight end in a split out, maybe in a slot. I'm thinking, Will Kazmarek and G. Scott Jr., Bennett Christian, Jelani Thurman, they don't have to be on the field consistently. If the offensive line were fully healthy, I think it'll make a whole lot more sense if the offensive line were fully healthy to take them off the field, leave your three wideouts, you put Henderson, you put Judkins up there, and let that thing rock. I think that makes a whole lot more sense. But due to the nature of the offensive line right now, you kind of have to wait and see how those guys pass block, how they help each other, how they move the line to see, can they handle only being the guys in pass protection without having a tight end at the end of the line. Because if they can, if they figure out a formula that works, man, look, you got Jeremiah Smith, Emeka Egbuka, Carnell Tate, Quinshon Judkins, and TreVeyon Henderson on the field at the same time. What nightmare does that provide for the opposing defense? It's a big one. It's a massive nightmare that nobody out there wants to deal with, but Ohio State can do that. Now, I understand what Chip Kelly is saying. I don't fully believe that there's that with, even though Ohio State's mainly a one-back system, I do not believe that. I don't believe at all that you can't play two guys out there at the same time. Because that was one of the biggest draws to have Quinshon Judkins here. Well, one of the bigger draws. Not only having a great running mate for TreVeyon Henderson, but also both guys can play out there together. That's literally a weapon Ohio State rarely uses. But they should. And I ain't talking about the T formation, baby. I'm not talking about that. You know, if you want to call that 32 personnel or whatever you want to call it. I am not talking about that formation. Your own 35-yard line. Let's go ahead and move this thing and score. What can you do? There's so many options Ohio State has on offense, and they can exploit all of them. They should exploit all of them. It goes back to Ohio State making sure they maximize their strengths. No matter if it's Will Howard's strengths, no matter if it's the running backs, if it's the receivers, if it's the guys on defense, whatever it is, make sure Ohio State maximizes their strengths, and that's going to give them the best opportunity to beat Tennessee on Saturday night in the shoe and to move on to get a rematch with Oregon in the Rose Bowl. Now, even though that's possible, I want to remind everyone about this one very fact before closing up shop. Even though Ohio State can get a rematch with Oregon, you can't look to the Rose Bowl. You must focus on the Volunteers. Looking ahead to the Rose Bowl could lead to doom on Saturday night, could lead to another playoff loss in this year, and all of a sudden you're looking at a team where all the promise, the players came back, didn't go to the NFL. This is the year to do the natty or bust thing, and all of a sudden Ohio State busted because they were looking at the team in the very next round without taking care of business in the first round. Taking care of business in the first round is the most important thing Ohio State can do right now, because if they take care of business in the first round, if they focus on that, I firmly believe they'll be just fine. Don't let any outside obstacles be thrown your way. Don't let any outside influences mess you up and get you off your path of being the Volunteers and focusing on the Volunteers. That's the main focus and nothing else. And as long as that's the main focus, I believe Ohio State will be just fine on Saturday night. Thank y'all for tapping in Locked On Buckeyes and making this show your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, make sure you check out the Locked On Big Ten podcast, because my guy, Craig Sheeman, is a guy that puts the Big Ten first when everyone else overlooks it. Find Locked On Big Ten on the YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can follow me on Twitter at jstevens07. Send every email to jstevens317@gmail.com. This has been Locked On Buckeyes on Tuesday. We'll see you next time.